All right. Hello, good morning, and good afternoon for those joining us from other time zones. Welcome to today's webinar, Providing Interactive Analytics on Excel with Billions of Rows. My name is Tyler Wishnoff. I'm a marketing manager for Kyligence and your moderator for today's session. I'm joined by Saswata Sengupta, Kyligence's Senior Solutions Architect. Saswata brings with him over 2 decades of experience managing and delivering data and analytics solutions for Fortune 100 companies and leading organizations across every industry. He'll apply that experience today as he shares with us the challenges users of Microsoft Excel face when working with massive data sets and what can be done to deliver optimal performance every time. Now, before we begin, a few minor housekeeping items. Today's presentation should run for about 30 to 45 minutes with 15 minutes reserved at the end for Q&A. Please reserve all questions for the Q&A section. You may communicate those questions at any time via the Q&A function, which can be toggled with the Q&A symbol at the bottom of your screen. Lastly, this webinar is also being recorded, and you will have access to it a few days following the session. With that said, I'll pass things over to Saswata to get us started. Saswata, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, everyone, for joining this Thursday afternoon or wherever you are, morning, evening webinar on Kyligence and how we are empowering Excel users to work on that billions of rows of data coming from your data lake or cloud storage or your massively distributed computing platforms. With that, let's get started here. So here is a story about you or analysts like you or users like you, the Excel superhero, the unsung hero of modern analytics. You are the movers and shakers. Excel has been fulfilling business analytics, generating complex reports and analysis, building those models, and keeping everyone happy, moving that business forward. The Excel superhero, you guys are doing that time and again and over a period of time. From a small mom and pop shop to a large enterprise, Excel sits every single place. And Excel is actually making sure that that information, that analysis, that complex model creation, everything is done right so that the business has the right kind of information to work on and making sure that they understand the value proposition from their large-scale data investment. To that extent, even for BI tools of the modern era, they also provide a dump into the Excel because end of the day, you, the Excel superheroes, are making things possible for the organization to understand where they should invest, where they should not invest, what is the trend in the market, so on and so forth. To that extent, you Excel superheroes also would come back home and use Excel for your expense reporting and monthly expense calculation and stuff. So you are doing everything right from that smallest little thing to the large analytics and enabling organization to move forward. But then again, you know, every superhero story requires a supervillain. Excel had many, and in recent years, you have something called big data, the big data supervillain. And the reason is that the big data comes with its own set of challenges, the large data set, often billions of rows, sitting in the data lake, cloud storage, distributed database, so on and so forth. And when you try to use Excel to connect to those data sets, it often becomes very, very difficult. It often becomes very time consuming to get the data because Excel doesn't cache data. You guys take the data, you guys crunch on those numbers, apply those formulas, VLOOKUPs, sum ifs and whatnot, and get those output to the business that what is possible versus what is not, what things can data represent versus not, and then provide those charts and other information. But with big data, it becomes increasingly difficult. So this slow processing time would lead to inefficient decision making. Excel sits where most of the analysts are providing that decision making data trend analytics to the executives of the organization. Slow processing would hamper that. complex calculations on that billions of rows, it's practically impossible because you're absorbing all those data at a granular level, at a transactional level, and then trying to do it in Excel. It's going to be impossible. Plus, with the size of data, the number of concurrent users within the organization, everyone making that session connection, it becomes very, very difficult. The Excel superhero needs some help there. With that, the big data villain, as you know him, he comes with a very, very distinct challenges for the current organization. His motto is to finish every Excel users or Excel in the world. How? Limited scalability. So Excel, as you know, doesn't cache data. So when it comes to crunching and accessing that large number of data, this is always going to be a scalability issue because Excel is running into your local machine. How you absorb all those data from multiple distributed systems, how you scale it out, it's not going to be possible. So there is always that challenge which exists. Then with a big data explosion, many data sources are generating data. Even these days, not even humans, machines generate data in forms of IoT data. Even your smart refrigerators or smart devices are generating data and logs, and sometimes organization is looking at it. This poses a problem of creating those large number of dimensions measured, so on and so forth. And in most cases, it is very difficult for Excel to work on those number of dimensions. It's limited by the number of dimensions. Also, that slow response time that comes with that larger set of data. Obviously, when you're dealing with a petabyte scale of data, and most of you have seen that, even though Excel can accommodate large number of rows and cells, etc., when it comes to the big set of data, it takes a lot of time to ingest that data, absorb that data. And it becomes very time consuming to even run those models. Even if you have written something in VB macros and stuff, running that, ingesting that data, it's a time consuming process for an analyst who are probably running that and going to brew your coffee, come back and then still running. So it's not a very optimal scenario. And then difficulty accessing the data. Sometimes the data are unstructured in nature. Sometimes it's semi-structured in nature. Sometimes it's in CSV format. Taking all those pieces of data and stitching it together within Excel, it's a time-consuming job. All of us who know that when we import data and we kind of define whether that's a CSV file or a hash delimited or a tab delimited, when we do that, when we check on all those parameters, we still get junk characters because we didn't parse it correctly. So accessing that data is also very, very difficult for Excel. With that, if I look into an organization, we really cannot get away with Excel, even with the big data. So we take an example for compliance, for example, as a compliance industry, there are policies, there are laws, there are data coming in from different sources. You are governing the data, and then you're using Excel to crunch those numbers, seeing where the cracks are within the compliance, etc. You really cannot get away from the big data. Half of this informations, logs, access logs, for example, rules and regulation, they sit on either a big data or a distributed scale data kind of system. You take about the telecom industry where you have SIP logs coming in, which actually has call data, called drop data, and you correlate with the weather information and other maintenance information. All these things are going to be impossible to do in Excel in current technology and current environment, just because of the size of those log files and data. So is it true with clinical data. You take the worlds of hedge fund, whether that's fraud detection, investment banking, customer 360, interesting use cases. You collect all those informations from demographics and your customer applications, apps, billing, transaction data, and you stitch together everything in probably an Excel and try to create that information, the trending, etc., to find out who is the most valuable customer. It is not going to be possible because half of this information sits in a big data kind of an environment. Taking all those things, crunching those numbers, creating those aggregations are going to be very, very difficult. But then again, you cannot get away with Excel. Excel is a tool of choice for many analysts and many industry, just because of the ease of use. You can have complicated models created in Excel. You can add pivot table, pivot chart, macros, etc. And not only that, Excel is really, really time-tested, easily available for everyone. And every analyst can use that to build their own analytics. So here is a fun fact with that. Do you know, according to Microsoft, about 1.2 billion people use Microsoft Office, which means that 16% of the world's population is using Excel. Now let that sink in. Let that number sink in. So we are talking about 16% of the world population using Excel, and all of them either are dealing with big data or will be dealing with situations like big data, large data coming from different heterogeneous sources. So switch back gear here and let's talk about how Kyligence can solve this problem for Excel, how we can enable Excel and Excel users. But to start that, we have to go back to the history a little bit. So flashback 10 years back, we are looking at a product called Apache Kylin. Now, Apache Kylin is an open source OLAP solution. It's a top level Apache project. It has been kind of rated as one of the best big data source, open source project for big data. And what it provides is a sub-second interactive query, and 1,000+ organizations have been using it. It's a proven tool, it's open source, there is a large community around it. Now with that, Kyligence was developed. Kyligence is nothing but Kylin plus intelligence. The founders of this Apache Kylin, they developed this product in eBay, and then it was donated back to the Apache Software Foundation. But those founders, they felt a need that there is a gap for that adoption of Apache Kylin into an enterprise level solution. Most of the organization who are looking at enterprise solution, they are looking for that kind of support. They are looking for that kind of security features and then enhancement going forward. So around 2016, the creators of Apache Kylin built this solution called Kyligence, which is Kylin and intelligence, which means that it has an AI augmented engine, which is always working in the background to enhance the cube, the model, the data management, so on and so forth. It has been rated as one of the top 10 big startups, and Kyligence, we have a global presence in San Jose and Shanghai with headquarters in San Jose and Shanghai, and then offices in Seattle, New York, and Beijing. It has been getting a lot of attraction from the investment community, and most recently, a seed series funding in 2019 through Cotu. Now, the way to look at Apache Kylin is how Spark is to Databricks. So Databricks took Apache Spark and they created a very robust enterprise product. Hadoop, Cloudera, and Hortonworks, now it's only Cloudera, they created a robust distribution around it. Same thing with Kafka, same thing with Elasticsearch, with Elastic, Kafka with Confluent. Apache Kylin with Kyligence is the same. It's the core of the engine is that open source engine, but when we took over, we created this enterprise distribution around it. We made it more robust in terms of security, in terms of features, look and feel, and that support which every enterprise needs. So you, the Excel superhero, plus Kyligence, it's no less than a team of Avengers. How? Because with Kyligence, with the technology of Kyligence, we can crunch that billions and billions of rows very easily for you, Mr. Excel superhero. Like every superhero needs a sidekick or a team, we are there for you. Now here are some big names of the world who have been using Kyligence. Exactly, L'Oreal, McDonald's, UnionPay, Abzen, Lenovo, and these are the few to name with. But most of these organizations are looking for that scalability, that performance, and they have definitely Excel as one of their tools of consumption for the data analytics, but they have other tools as well. So Kyligence has provided and enabled all this organization and their analysts and users who are using Excel to become that that conversant with the data. They can do work on that larger set of data and provide that kind of analytics to the end users and the organization, and take full advantage of the investment this organization has made in the big data side. So flashback here, and again, there's a two diagram, the left side diagram, the right side diagram. We talked a lot about Apache Kylin and Kyligence, what it is and what it does, but why Kyligence? Why is this a solution which is going to be helpful for Excel or the business analytics community out there? So if you look into the left-hand side diagram, this has been a very proven technology, right? A lot of Excel analysts and users have been using OLAP technology underneath, connecting to your data marts, CRMs, orders, point of sales information, etc. And taking that data through an OLAP engine, because it can create MDX functions where you can create hierarchies and stuff, and then some other kind of more modern calculations and MDX functions. And Excel can consume that data set itself, and it can actually render that information very easily to the end user. But that's not enough, right? With modern analytics, OLAP is getting limited. So if you come back and look into the right side of the diagram, you will see where Kyligence actually sits. Kyligence is an enterprise level tool with different layers, the query engine, the multi-level access, multi-tenant, which is very important for most of the organization. Distributed architecture, it can sit on larger scale of data like data lake, data warehouse, and your large set of logs. And also it has something called a semantic layer, which can have MDX, through which you can do complex modeling, measure groups, etc. And you can expose that to the business analyst and the business analytics community. Now, this is very important. Why? Because you will get a lower TCO, which means that here, for example, the data set is actually, Kyligence is actually sitting on your data lake, number one. Number two, it is taking advantage of your resources within your data lake. So you are not creating another layer in between Kyligence to accelerate or maybe do the caching and all. There is no additional server investment. It can sit exactly where your data set is and then provide that enterprise grade security and then some of those capabilities to do ad hoc query and analysis. With that, and I'm going to take it out. With that, I'm going to actually switch gear a little bit. I'm going to talk about some of those problems which you as a user would face. So let's come back to this whiteboard. So here is a modern analytic infrastructure. So you have your data warehouse. You have your larger OLTP system, which can be your CRM or other systems coming in. And then you have a bunch of files which are coming in. These are all CSV files. And what happens in the modern world of analytics is that all this data, through some process or the other, this could be real time, this could be something else, and it could be an ETL process itself. This data actually goes and sits in something called our data lake. This data lake can be in your AWS S3, Azure data lake, or can be in your on-prem Hadoop environment, right? Now, once you have the data in the data lake, problem is it is unstructured, right? Unstructured. And then there are a lot of information sitting in. For an Excel user to connect, it's not really the right place to do. So what you would do is you create a layer where you transition this data or do some ETL and put it into smaller data marts, right? These are your data marts, which you get the data and you jump it here. Or you create a hydration layer within your data lake where you have the data more curated and you take it and put it here through, again, an ETL process. So this is a hydration layer. This is, pardon my handwriting, but I just wanted to give an idea that this is how everything is working in the modern world. And you, the Excel users or the Excel superheroes here sitting here, you have only two choices. Either you can connect to this data lake or the hydration layer, which is going to be pretty slow, or you can connect to this data marts where you will have information is silos. So to explain that, even with this data mart or modern architecture 1, there will be latency. There will be silos. And above all, there will be access issues because the data could be unstructured. So let's bring everything together here, right? Let's bring all this information together here. So you see that as an Excel analyst, you know that the data is more valuable when it is a hot data. But if you take this process itself, there is a latency to move the data from this to this here. Even this hydration process itself, there is a latency. There are data which are sitting in silos. So whenever you are connecting with Excel, you probably create multiple Excel and output of one Excel, you take it into another, and then you actually do your computations. Same thing with the access issues. Because it's unstructured data, you will have to rely on the ETL. So you cannot directly go there and get the data out of this. You have to wait for those whole ETL process to be completed. So as an Excel superhero Excel user, even though you have done great job with Excel, created those macros and other stuff, your life is not complete. It is still the same old process of connecting from a regular data warehouse or the DBs of the world. So let's see how Kyligence is actually kind of helping the whole process itself. So I'm going to come back here and let me make this a full screen. So Kyligence solution. There are a couple of very intelligent way Kyligence does all these things. Automatic model creation, which means that every time you run a query, the queries are being trapped, and I'm going to show it as part of the demo. The AI augmented engine actually take those queries and then it can create a model out of those queries, which is very helpful because you do not have to rely on the architects to create the model for you. Your schema evolution. So when you do queries and stuff, as a query, as an analyst, you know that there is no way you can have all the measures available upfront. So if you're creating a new measure or a KPI, sometimes this big data or distributed computing systems have tough time accommodating that schema changes. But with Kyligence, we can very easily do that with our AI engine. And then with that automatic query optimization. Remember those days as an Excel user when you have to do something and you have to go back, ask the DBS to create indexes, optimize the data underlying databases, or the big data architect to create new partitions? That is no longer required. Kyligence can automatically manage that through the AI engine itself. So here is another way to look into that OLAP architecture and why Kyligence is one of the enterprise preferred solution. Because when you do this OLAP kind of solution, the traditional OLAP itself is always single node. And then it's a very rigid schema. More importantly, you are stuck to that cube for the answer, which means that as an Excel user, if you want to do some detailed data analysis, you really cannot do it because you have to get whatever is there within the cube. But come to Kyligence, I just mentioned about the adaptive schema. The schema always changes based on your query pattern. It's a distributed system which actually sits on your big data cluster. We bring our own Spark, so you do not have to worry about the processing itself. And then the OLAP cube provides sub-second response, and you are always guaranteed the answer. Even if the OLAP cube doesn't know the answer, which means the aggregations are not there, it can do a smart push down to the actual source, and your query results and responses are always guaranteed. You will always get a guarantee regardless of where the data sits, whether it's in the cube, which is preferably in the cube. But if it is not, you will still get an answer as the data goes back into the actual source via smart push down. Traditional OLAP or BI cannot do that. And that's where Kyligence really, really shines. So here is another way to look into this whole architecture and diagram. So we connect to many sources, whether that's AWS, on-prem Hadoop, Kafka, Snowflake, Azure, etc. And through our semantic layer, we create that multi-tenant environment where each and every department can look into their data, providing that level of security, row level, column level, cell level access. Bring our own Spark container to make everything super fast and super scalable. AI augmented engine to manage the whole process of making the schema evolve over a period of time, auto-tune the models, and making sure, regardless of the size of the data, you're always getting that super fast response. And then we connect to every data source, and we can sit on any of these data source directly without the requirement of getting new hardware or servers. And then we can connect to various sources via ANSI SQL, MDX, and REST API, which is very important because while you as an Excel user can consume the data via JDBC, you also need MDX, and also there are organizations who would actually create a data as a service layer, and they would need the REST APIs to connect to the source. So it's a complete solution which provides everything packaged together. And here is one more different way of looking into the architecture diagram, where we connect to most of the database and sources, event files, logs, IoT data. We can sit on any of those data lake kind of solutions, on-prem or over the cloud. We provide this 3 distinct layer of management, which takes care of the auto scaling, maintenance, provide that total cost of ownership. Query engine, we add a smart modeling tool, enterprise grade security, and the semantic layer, where you can actually create data governance, and then the visualization, self-service, collaboration, third-party tool access, and then allowing the data to go to the data service layer via multidimensional query, REST APIs, and also exposing to third-party and machine learning. With that, here are some of the great value propositions of Kyligence. Before we jump into the demo, wanted to touch upon this, and those who have been working on the Excel or maybe on the architecture side as well, they have seen this, the cube building time. Sometimes it takes a lot of time to build the cube where the data is not available for Excel to consume. We don't do that. We do incremental cube refresh and read and write are separated. So you will always get the data no matter what. Sub-second query response, very important for most organization. Multi-level security at project, table, row level with RBAC control, Kerberos, LDAP integration. We do all that. A semantic layer to support complex business logic, very important for us because we can create the semantic layer with governed data set that can be exposed to any tool, including Excel, and we have a demo for that. And then seamless integration to any BI tools, whether that's Excel or something else. So with that, I'm going to switch back into a demo. I want to give my audience a look and feel of how easy it is to use Kyligence and do those large set of compute. So with that, I'm going to get here and get into this environment. So this environment, this Excel is actually connected to the Kyligence enterprise engine. And we are looking at 60 billion row here. And the data is coming in a fraction of a second without any caching, without any aggregation layer in between. Kyligence engine can take care of all these things. So not only that, this is actually connected to MDX. That's why it is coming as a pivot table, but I can do something else as well, right? I can have more measures here. I can have a total price come in. I can have a total profit coming in, and I can have total revenue. With that, I can add also hierarchies here, and these all hierarchies have been created via our semantic layer and exposed to the BI, this Excel tool or any other BI tool for that matter. And I can have my date, my customer here. And then what I can do is I created some of those complicated calculated measures in the semantic layer. I can add that to here. And with that, I can actually click on expanding in some of this as well. And it can go and get the data back, fraction of a second, 60 billion rows we are working on. And then I can go and drill down to the year level and look at the months. Think about the power, let that sink in. This is your Excel, same old Excel, and you're looking at a 60 billion row, that large petabytes of data set. Let's take one more example here. Let's take a pivot chart. We do the same thing, and let me show you the count here in the pivot chart, same 60 billion rows, but count is not important. So I'm going to take a couple of other measures here. Maybe I'll take the total price, and I will take the total profit and total revenue. And I will do the same thing, right? I will add the date hierarchy here. Notice that how quickly the date hierarchy will be added here. And then I have 1995. but I can select all years and I click on this. It can come for all years, and I can click on this. It will go ahead and break it down by month. Now, while Excel is rendering this, how is it happening in the background? Let's take a look into it and let's see how Kyligence is really working hard and making sure that Excel is successful in getting the data in the sub-second response format. So here is an example, okay? Let me refresh this query history once. And here is one example of the query history. See, so this query, and this is exactly my time here. If you see, all these queries are coming from Excel. And let me expand on this. And you can see this is like large queries which are coming on, looking at 1997 or maybe 1994, the way I have expanded the year. All these things are coming from Excel, and these are being replied in a sub-second response. So when I say sub-second, it is 0.32 second, which is not even a second, to go and answer from a 60 billion row. And how it works is through this something called the model itself. So let's understand what is a model here. So model is nothing but, remember we are talking about the OLAP model for a while, and what it is. This is the modern version of the OLAP. This is the next generation of the OLAP. This is a distributed OLAP analytics engine. So heart of this engine, if you look into this, is something called aggregation groups or smaller structures. In traditional Apache Kylin world, you call it cuboids. These are nothing but combinations of your each of your cells and each of your attributes and dimension in a different manner. And the AI augmented engine is actually maintaining this as a live creature. And every time you run the query, it actually does set up some recommendation for you here to do whatever you want to do. So here the recommendation is to add certain measures or add certain indexes here. And it will tell you if you do those, add those indexes, it will make it even more faster. And how these cuboids look like, let's take a look into it. So each of these cuboids is actually a combination of different measures and different dimensions. So here it's a combination of the category and the count. But if I come here and click on this, this has different other measures. It has a profit, it has total revenue, but it also has dimensions for customer regions and nations and all. So in other words, this whole OLAP cube is based out of many DNAs of these cuboids, which bringing everything together. And that's why the query response time is super fast. So how does those queries get trapped and they are ready for a recommendation? We have something called a smart acceleration engine. And here is an example, right? All these queries which I did are sitting here to be accelerated. And you can set this acceleration. Obviously, you don't want, if you have 10,000 users, you don't want 10,000 users to user queries to be accelerated. So you can set up those acceleration rules here. You can set up the users, the groups, the frequency, the latency on which this acceleration will happen. But more importantly, here, see, it right in front of you, this got accelerated, and those accelerated queries are going to be sitting here. Some of them will not be accelerated because there are some rules here, and there is saying that no matching models, or maybe there is a certain mismatch within the data type, or maybe something else that this model already is optimized, so you do not need to do the acceleration again. So the intelligent engine actually take care of most of these things by itself without the user intervening. Auto tuning. So as an Excel user, when you are querying that, whether that's 60 billion, 80 billion, 100 billion, the performance is always same. You are never stuck just because the data size is huge and you cannot do your compute. Those days are gone. Kyligence is here to help you, make you really successful. And then with that, I want to touch upon something called our MDX layer. So within the MDX layer, this is our semantic layer. As I mentioned, we have a SQL layer, we have a REST API here layer. So this is a semantic layer where we can actually come here and create little governed set of data. So here we have actually created a business definition, but more importantly, you can create hierarchies here. Right here, I have created certain hierarchies for year, month, and day. And then I can create calculated measures as well. So for example, if I come here, I have created a year-to-date calculation using MGX, which has been exposed in my Excel solution. So for example, if I go back into my Excel here and go back to my spreadsheet here, those things here, year over year, has been exposed here. And then if I move this here, somewhere here, there are some values here, year over year, from 92 to 93, you can get those calculations. So all these things have been achieved. All these hierarchies and all have been achieved via this semantic layer. We have created these hierarchies here. This is again a customer hierarchy, for example. We have created those customer hierarchies here, and then with the region, name, and city. And there is no limitation. And the performance is always guaranteed. So with that, you realize that Kyligence brings in a whole body of a solution which is enterprise friendly, has a high level of security, provides that semantic layer and flexibility, and that AI engine which is always working to make you successful behind the scene. Switching back now to my presentation here. So let's talk about some sample success stories here, which is very important, right? So what is a customer adoption? So we talked about eBay, right? You know, Apache Kylin was initially envisioned and created in eBay to originally replace Teradata, because Teradata, while it is great for transactional systems and stuff, or maybe some of the analytical system, but when it came to the concurrent users, it really didn't scale. Teradata didn't work, and that's why when it came to that kind of investment where you have a large data lake, this made sense. Apache Kylin made sense, and that's why eBay invested, and then finally went to Apache Kyligence from Apache Kylin, and that got that enterprise kind of a product itself with all the securities, bells and whistles, semantic layer, etc. Then let's talk about this top 3 global bank. Their situation is really unique. They have 3 trillion rows, but they have 100,000 concurrent users from various devices, handheld devices, iPads, etc. That's the modern world of computing, right? Even with Excel, you use your iPads on your phones and stuff, and you are looking at the data. For them, with their solution of Teradata, that concurrent users with that number of rows, millisecond response, it was not really scaling. That was not the right solution. Not to mention it could become a legacy kind of a solution. Was not modern for the cloud or the enterprise big data. So Kyligence replaced that, and it made sure that those 100,000 concurrent users can get the rules response from trillions of rows in a fraction of a second, the way exactly I showed. Then there is another very interesting use case, as I showed in my diagrams earlier, that cubes, like Cognos cubes, they sit in silos, right? So for every subject, you have to create a cube. It's not distributed. Therefore, you keep on creating cubes. 1,200 cubes probably to solve, 100 or 200 business use case. Really not an ideal scenario. You shouldn't have to create silos of data in order to answer your queries. For us, because we can scale unlimited, we have no restriction on the number of dimensions, facts, measures, etc. We can do that very easily within one single model, taking out that headache of maintenance of the data, maintenance of that model. So 1,200 Cognos cubes replaced into 2 and serving that same set of user communities, which is a great, great achievement in terms of total cost of ownership, return of investment, and also getting rid of that maintenance nightmare and headache. And then finally, this world's largest credit card company using Greenplum, replacing Greenplum with Kyligence was a great success story there. They had a lot of issues with Greenplum in terms of concurrency, performance, etc. Kyligence came, we sat exactly where their Hadoop cluster is, and we solved their problem for their processing, credit card processing, and we could give that result for analytics, which for a Greenplum would take probably minutes, if not hours, in fraction of a second, which is a great, great success story. With that, here's one great Excel trivia, and there is, for nothing, I don't call Excel a great tool and you guys are superhero. If you take this trivia and look into this, there are like 17 trillion cells in Excel, and if you take 1 second to fill up every cell, it would take you 545 years. So Excel is not a limitation by no means. Excel is limited by the way you access the data, the technology behind it. So with Kyligence, we can really make you that successful superhero for Excel, no matter the size of your organization or the kind of business you are in. I would also like to go into a little more fun thing at the end. I know it has been a long presentation and a demo, but let's do something a little fun here. So I would like to hand over the control to Tyler while I ask some fun fact question here, and he would shoot a poll to you guys, and let's see who can get this answer right. Tyler, can you do a polling here, please?
Yes, of course. Let me launch this poll. You should see a poll show up in about a second, and give us about 10 to 20 seconds for people to put their answers in.
So it's a very interesting question, right? What number of actions can you undo in Excel, like the control Z's of the world? So I want you guys to, take a guess into it, and let's see how many correct answers do we get. So Tyler, let me know when you have those, answers.
Definitely got a very big diversity of opinions here. Give it about 6 more seconds before I'll end the poll. So final answers. All right, so I'm gonna end the poll now. All right, so our big winner right now, as far as guesses go on the survey, is 16, with second place being 100, and actually a three-way tie for third place for all the other answers. So what's the actual answer, Saswara?
So I think the second place winner should go and get them some beer today. It's 100, and 100 actions can be undone in Excel. So you can keep on doing it wrong 100 times, and then you can correct yourself. So with that, let's make it a little more interesting. So what is the earliest date allowed in Excel calculations? Right. Tyler, would you do a poll for me?
Of course. So we should be launching the next poll now. So give us some time to answer this question, folks. A lot of good choices, but I think one is definitely coming away the big winner right now. Give it about, yeah, still getting there. All right, I think we'll end the poll right now. It's pretty clear what's going to be winning this one. January 1st, 1900 is the #1 choice by the vast majority, although July 4th, 1776 picked up quite a few.
So let me get to the right answer. You guys are correct. The majority is always right. So it's January 1st, 1900, and not the July 4th. And interestingly, Excel treats 1900 January 1st as a leap year. It's a bug in Excel, but that's how it is. So good job, guys, who have guessed it. Not an easy guess to make. So let's make it even more interesting. So this is a simple calculation, right, within Excel. Without you, and I am assuming you are not going to cheat, not using Excel, if you apply this formula in your mind, what do you think the answer Excel would give? No use of spreadsheets, please. No use of Excel.
Yeah, we'll make the time window for this one a little bit shorter. Probably give people about 10 more seconds. Some of you probably had Excel open ready for this one. All right, we're going to end in about 2 seconds. All right, the #1 answer here this time, Saswara, was 0. Second place was error. And third place was, well, I won't read all the 9s, but the -9 answer. The other answer actually got 0 choices. So what was the actual answer to this question, Saswara?
Again, the folks at the second actually wins it. It's actually an error. And I'm guessing that you haven't used your spreadsheet, but good job guessing that. This is an error within Excel. And when you apply this formula particularly, probably it's used for some of their internal testing, it always comes at 0. And I didn't have this trivia here, but fun fact also, when Excel was created initially in the 1980s, it was meant for Mac, not for Windows. But then it transitioned into Windows, and then finally into the hands of all you users, whether whatever you are using. And then it has become one of the best popular tools of choice for analytics and analysis. With that, I am going to thank you all for taking your time for Thursday afternoon webinar. Thank you so much for attending. Please follow us at Kyligence, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, #Kyligence. And should you want to try out Kyligence, we have a free trial version. You can go to https://kyligence.io/download free trial, and you can choose your version on-prem or cloud, and you can try out the product. And visit us at www.kyligence.io and reach out to us. We will be more than happy to connect with you and make sure that you are successful in your business, in your technology, and whatever you do with your Excel. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for attending.
Great, thank you, Seswata. And now I'd like to open the floor to questions. Some of you have already submitted some, but remember, you can submit your questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of the interface. So let's see what's come in right now. All right, Seswata, the first question I have to ask, how long will it take to get 100,000 rows in Excel? If someone wants to get the 100,000 rows of data and not really just a summary of the data.
If it's the raw data, it's going to take probably a couple of seconds, not more than that. But if you are doing aggregation, it's going to be even lesser time. So when you have those 100,000 rows, sometimes it will require a push down, which means that it might go into the source. But our push downs are also optimized. So for 100,000, you do not anticipate more than a couple of seconds to get the data.
Great. And then, you mentioned Apache Kylin, and of course you talked at great length about Kyligence. But when it comes to Excel, what's the difference between Kyligence and Apache Kylin?
So with Kyligence, you have the ability to use MDX as a semantic layer, and you can actually use the semantic layer to create your own business definitions. Sometimes, as you know, and as I have shown in the diagram, the scribble I did in the whiteboard, data coming in from various sources sitting on the data lake, they are not always having the same uniform business definition. So with semantic layer, you can create that business definition. You can create that complex MDX calculation, those hierarchies and stuff, and expose it to Excel. With Apache Kylin, you don't have that. While Apache Kylin is very great for the performance, but when it comes to that enterprise grade security, computing, and the semantic layer, that's where Kyligence is great.
Awesome. And then sort of a similar follow-up between Apache Kylin and Kyligence. Obviously Kyligence and Kylin can support Excel, but what about other popular BI tools, things I suppose like Microsoft Power BI, Tableau? What's the difference, I suppose, when it comes to Kyligence and Apache Kylin with various BI tools, and do they support them?
Yes, we do support everything. In fact, Apache Kylin doesn't have an MDX layer, but Kyligence has an MDX layer. So if you have tools like MicroStrategy, or maybe tools like Tableau, which can take advantage of the MDX, we can provide that. We also provide SQL access, which is the general SQL access via JDBC or DBC. We can also provide access via REST APIs. So we have those robust set of protocols or ways to access the data, including MDX, which is one of the most popular ways to kind of do the cross analysis of the data through many variations.
Great. And then again, along that same vein, we've got another question. Can Kyligence integrate with OpenOffice like LibreOffice?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. And then a couple of the questions that I still have that have just come in. Are there data limits when it comes to Kyligence? Like how much data can it support when using Excel? Is there a cap or a maximum?
Kyligence doesn't have any limit. We can give you the data, but Excel these days doesn't also have a limit. I show you probably 17 trillion cells it can support. So there is no limitation on the amount of data. Neither there is a limitation on the hierarchies you can build in. But as an Excel user, you have to be considerate about the kind of aggregations you will look at, and you have to build that in the model. That's all. In our side, the Kyligence side, we do not have any limitations because we work at the distributed scale. So we can support any number of rows or data coming in as long as Excel can accommodate.
Is there a sandbox for starting a trial with Kyligence?
Yes, if you can visit the link which I have provided, you can actually get into trial license, or you can download the product with a trial license and try it in your on-prem. So we have an on-prem version or a cloud version. So depending on whatever is your choice, you can get a free trial.
And would someone need Hive, or is Kyligence enough to handle data in a detailed level?
You don't need Hive. As long as your data is available, we can actually directly access the data. You don't need to create Hive tables. Kyligence is capable of doing it without creating hives or hive level partitions, etc.
All right, awesome. Well, that's all the questions I currently have in. Probably close this out in a couple of seconds unless anyone has any burning questions that remain. But of course, if you have any additional questions, you can always follow up with us directly. You can reach out to me. My contact information is obviously available, but you can reach out through our website as well. We've got plenty of people that are standing by to help you out. But with that, it doesn't look like we've got any other questions that are coming in. But thanks again for all of that. And so, I guess that'll be all the time we have today. So thank you again, Siswata, for sharing your insights with us. And an extra special thank you to everyone who attended today's session. We really hope you got a lot out of it. And we look forward to having you at our webinar next week, Thursday, May 7th. We will be discussing count distinct query performance. It'll be a really great opportunity to learn about how to deliver record-setting query speeds on any volume of data without sacrificing accuracy. So if count distinct is a popular function in your organization, or if you're curious about open source solutions for big data like Apache Kylin, you'll really get a lot out of this session. And if you're interested in learning more about Kyligence and how we can help data teams leverage AI to accelerate and embrace self-service analytics, or if you'd like to set up a personalized one-on-one demo, you can visit our website at www.kyligence.io. You can also request a free trial of our on-premise and cloud solutions through our website from the top right corner of our homepage on your desktop. It's super easy to get started on your own, and we're here if you happen to need any support. Really, no obligations. Give it a try. You can sign up right now. If you're wondering about the free Kyligence shirt, keep an eye on your inbox for an email from a member of our team with more information on how to request it. And as for the $25 gift cards, we'll be holding our drawing later this week, and we'll reach out to you if you are selected. Finally, as Siswata said, be sure to follow us on Twitter at @Kyligence and on LinkedIn. Thanks again for attending. Have a wonderful rest of your day.